Hello fellow Swollers, this is Ricky with SwollYourRollSports.com. I'm going to do a video walkthrough today, talk about some NFL. This is going to be something I start putting out on a weekly basis for our members and guys that buy our lineups and guys that play underneath us. So it's a little more premium content. We're going to discuss a lot more game theory and why it is we pick the players we pick. We've had a lot of success this year in the NFL. And I'm going to kind of walk you through my mindset and a lot of the choices that I make, because there is a choice that I would be able to explain in every time we pick somebody for our lineups. And I kind of want to give you guys some basic game theory going forward on why we pick the guys that we pick. Without further ado, we're gonna start today by going over defenses. And some of the defenses I'm targeting this week are Detroit at home against Tampa Bay. Tampa has a lot of turnover problems. Detroit has one of the better defenses in the league. Green Bay at Atlanta is an interesting one. That's going to be a high over-under. Atlanta has really fallen apart. They've got some coaching problems there, and it's in Green Bay. In the last couple of games that Green Bay has played at home, they've had some monster defensive games. Seattle against Philly is interesting. Philadelphia obviously has a high-powered offense, and they've done really well recently, but Seattle's kind of been that Seattle of old recently, where they've played a lot more stellar defense. I don't think I'll be paying $5,400 for them, and I'm certainly not going to pay $5,500 for Philly's defense. Philly's defense this year has been very opportunistic. They've scored a lot of touchdowns. They've been in the right spot. Defense in general, when talking about scoring touchdowns, is one of the most least predictive statistics in terms of fantasy sports. For instance, I think it was last year, Kansas City was scoring a ton of defensive touchdowns, and while sacks and interceptions, well, specifically sacks and points allowed, are very predictive, there's a lot of luck involved in interceptions and defensive touchdowns. San Francisco, obviously the most expensive after what St. Louis did to Oakland last week, but I would be surprised if San Francisco did anything near the 32-point output that St. Louis did, but certainly not a bad option at $5,600. Don't really love any of the cheaper options this week, so I think we're going to start and plug in. You could obviously go Houston at Jacksonville anytime you're playing Jacksonville. It's definitely a viable option, but I think we're going to start and plug in Detroit at home against Tampa for this lineup right here. Next thing I like to do is go kicker. Immediately go to the $4,500 range down here, and the first thing I look for is a team that's going to be reasonably scoring, where the weather's not an issue, and I plug it in. And the first kicker I see right there fits that bill perfectly. Shane Graham's going to be inside for New Orleans. I just want to make sure, since I don't follow a lot of kicker news, that he wasn't waived. It seems to happen quite a bit this year where they just get rid of a kicker. But yeah, I think I'll plug in Shane Graham at 45, and there's a very specific reason why I don't spend on kickers. And in future videos, I'm going to give you some statistics to support kind of my game theory on that as well. So from there, we'll move on to quarterback. There's a couple of interesting options at quarterback this week. I have a spreadsheet that I work with every week to kind of narrow down who I'm looking at. I think the most obvious choice for everyone this week is going to be Aaron Rodgers. He's the most expensive quarterback on the board. He plays Atlanta. Atlanta's 31st against the pass this year. They're going to be at home. Rodgers has had no problems at home. I'll have to monitor the weather before I actually stick him into my lineup, but I'd imagine Aaron Rodgers and his game log here, 25-19 at Minnesota, 28-37, 27. The guy's a premium play, and he has a premium matchup, so you can easily plug him in. This is cash game here. An interesting option down here for a cheaper option, and I don't think I'd play him in any of my cash games, but Eli Manning with 16.7 average, you can see that he's cheaper than a lot of guys above him with lower averages. For instance, he has a better average than Cam Newton. Cam Newton's 7,800. He has a much better average than Andy Dalton, and Dalton's 7,900. He's right up there with Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan's 7,900 as well. Fanduel does their pricing, and you can tell based on the streak that a player's on. So Eli obviously hasn't been doing all that well. However, as the stat people we are here at Swole, we tend to think that numbers regress towards the mean. And just two games ago, beautiful game, 25 points up against Dallas. Obviously struggled last week against Jacksonville in a loss, but he's an interesting option this week. Tennessee has been less than average, to put it nicely, against the pass. My chart has them at 25th against the pass, and it wouldn't surprise me if Eli had an above average game on the road. It definitely something I'm taking into consideration. Another quarterback that I'm on this week is Matthew Stafford. Let's find Matty Stafford here. He's 8,300. He's against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's 21st against the pass. He's got Megatron back now, and Megatron actually had a nice game his last game. Obviously, a lot of these games are inconsistent. Arizona's done this to a bunch of quarterbacks this year. 18 against Miami, not terrible. But I think he's an interesting option with the 16.5 average and a very good matchup, and his receiving core starting to come back a little bit. I think Matt Stafford's somebody else I could plug in. For this lineup, I guess I will plug in the obvious choice and put in Aaron Rodgers, and we'll go from there. So we can start at running backs, and there's a reason I start from quarterbacks and move to running backs, and I'll get into that in some theory later on. But we're going to move on to running backs. There's a few I'm looking at. The most interesting one here is the most expensive one on the board, and I don't have a problem paying for it. Cincinnati has done a very poor job against running backs this year. They've had rough games against Cleveland's running backs. I think that was the game that they gave up 3 touchdowns to Cleveland backs, and they struggled against Trent Richardson, and really no team should ever struggle against Trent Richardson. So Le'Veon Bell against the 32nd adjusted rush defense, I think is a great call this week. Cincinnati actually has a pretty good pass defense, so I could see Pittsburgh easily trying to control the ball here and slow the pace and pounding it into Le'Veon Bell, and I'll stick him in. And again, you guys that have bought my lineups and are members that are used to this, you probably always see a lot of expensive quarterbacks and running backs, and like I said, I'm going to start putting out some more game theory videos for you guys so you can get into why it is we build the lineups the way we do. But for this lineup here, we're going to stick with Aaron Rodgers and Le'Veon Bell. A second running back is a bit cheaper, which I don't do a lot, and I'm not completely convinced that I'm going to stick with this right now, but much cheaper down here was Chris Johnson. I'll have to check the injury status. Usually everyone's injured at this time of the year, but last week he had a set on Monday night against Miami. He had 17 carries for 105 yards, and he's decent at catching the ball out of the backfield. And his matchup this week is a favorable matchup. Minnesota has a decent pass defense, and they've struggled a lot this year against the run. I could be talked into Ivory or Johnson here, but I think Johnson has a little bit more upside, and at 5,200, I think he pays off his salary this week. If you watched last week, they came out and they just ran the ball all over Miami, and Miami has a decent run defense. It's obvious that they don't have a quarterback there, and we'll get into that later. I suspect that's more of a Rex Ryan issue than a Geno Smith and Michael Vick issue. I think both of them are bad, but I think they're nowhere near as bad as the stats would indicate this year. If you look at Mark Sanchez and what he's been able to do, he was never going to do that in Philadelphia. But I think for this lineup right now, I'm going to throw in Chris Johnson, and that'll leave us a little bit more to play at, sorry, let's move this up so you can see it, at the other positions. The next position I'm going to move into is the tight end, and if you're not paying for Rob Gronkowski or Jimmy Graham, and Julius Thomas has been hurt recently, then New Orleans, I think, off the top of my head, has the best, or is literally the worst against the pass. But defending the tight end, that is. So Greg Olson's an interesting option this week. I don't trust Cam. I think that offense is kind of folded in. So even though New Orleans is really bad at several positions, I'm not sure I'll have much exposure at all to Carolina anywhere in my lineup building, but that's still to come. The next obvious choice to me is Antonio Gates. If you look at his average for his price down here, it's fantastic, 5,600. I think he's well underpriced. New England is, I think, 30th against defending tight ends. He's had a couple of decent games in here, and at 5,600, it's hard to get hurt. And I really think he's got a great matchup and a lot of potential this week. So I'm going to plug him in here as well. That gives me a little bit more to spend on the wide receivers. So we're going to get over to the wide receivers now. We've got a couple of wide receivers left, or 3 wide receivers left, and 6,500 per wide receiver. So I'm gonna go to the first one here, and this is an interesting guy, Kenny Britt against Washington. This would be an absolute premium matchup. And last week I think he had 1 catch on 1 target against the Raiders. But if you guys remember, that was a 52-0 game, and a lot of their guys did nothing because Trey Mason took off running around the field. And Washington has a reasonable rush defense, and their pass defense has been abysmal. I think their overall pass defense is 32nd, and their rush defense is 10th. So I like a bounce back game for some of the St. Louis wide receivers, and Kenny Britt at 6,400 is an interesting option, as well as Stedman. Their backup. Let's find him here. Tomorrow. Let's get to Stedman. We can talk about him for a second. Stedman Bailey. He's just kind of come on here recently. 18-point game 2 games ago. Last week 5 for 100, and I think he did that all in the first quarter. And again, that game got out of hand pretty quickly. So he's another interesting option at 6,300 and 6,400. So just for this video right here, we're going to throw him in. Both of those positions are absolutely premium positions. There's a lot of different ways you can go with this. The next guy I want to look at here is Kendall Wright. We were all over him last week. He had a nice game. He once again has a very nice matchup. Wide receiver 1s against the New York Giants. His top 5 or 6 matchup last week. 7 receptions, 132 and a touchdown. I'm not looking for that out of him again, but I think he can pay off his value. So we can throw him in, and that leaves us $6,700 left. A few different ways we can go with that. I think the most obvious one here, this is actually the way I could have built this around to begin with, is Kenny Stills. Kenny Stills is an absolute must-play. They're at home, in the Dome. Whether he's the 1 or 2 for New Orleans right now, he's getting all the looks. His price went down from 5,600 to 5,100 2 weeks ago when he had the 8 for 98. That's because Fanduel sets their salaries Sunday night before the Monday night games. And then last week he went off for 5, 162 and a touchdown, 25. Everyone had him. He was 5,100. I think he's probably close to as much as a must-play as he was last week. I just think he's getting a lot of targets, and he has a lot of upside right now. So in this specific lineup here, not a lot of firepower here. Firepower, obviously the best running back and the best quarterback on the board. A very good defense this week. And when I have $300 left over like this, I just kind of go into the kicker spot and start looking for a $4,800 kicker that might have good weather. Brian against Green Bay, no. Cincinnati. Kai Forbath, I think I looked at that earlier. They probably moved the ball decently against St. Louis, so I would just probably upgrade right here. I'm assuming I get a ton of exposure from Shane Graham anyway because I don't like to spend. But in this specific lineup, I'm going to go ahead and plug him in. I could have, maneuvered around. There's a couple of other players I want, but this is definitely a lineup I'd feel comfortable in at this point to throw in there and get ready to go. Like I said, I'm going to start trying to make some more videos of these while I'm making some lineups, giving you guys some thought processes on it. And a little insight. I hope you guys have found this useful. If you guys have any requests or anything you'd like videos on, I'm really going to start trying to make some more. And as always, thanks for visiting SwolYourRollSports.com, and good luck in your fantasy weekend.